guest today is Roy Gessford. Hi, Roy.
Hello, Liam. Thank you for having me.
I am so happy that you're finally able to join us in this format. We've been talking quite a bit about preserving the Aramaic language. So I was like, you have to come and share this knowledge and this information and this passion with our audience, which consists of the members of the Chaldean Cultural Center, Unique Voices in Films, U of M Detroit chapter, and also we recently collaborated with CMN TV, which is going to be broadcasting this. So I'm very excited for everybody to hear about the work that you do and the importance of preserving the Aramaic language. And by the way, you are right now, I know you're not in California right now, but you're originally from Los Angeles, California, and you came to Michigan in August. This is when we met. You came to Michigan in August, and you came to the Cultural Center and you took a tour of our museum, and you introduced me to this fabulous book, Preserving the Chaldean Aramaic Language. This is so cool. So I would like to learn how you ended up as a non-Chaldean writing this book.
Well, my journey started actually very young. I learned an appreciation for the Chaldean people actually in my childhood when I would read the story of Daniel in the lion's den. And in that story, you had King Nebuchadnezzar. And one thing as a child that I always remembered about King Nebuchadnezzar was that his name had two Z's. And no one has two Z's. No, there's no names in English that have two Z's. So from my early childhood, in a way, I was introduced to Chaldeans and Aramaic. And over the years, I grew in respect for the Chaldean community. And my journey I ended up learning ancient languages. And I remember when somebody originally told me, I was with a sweet woman, and she said, Roy, you could learn ancient languages. And I thought to myself, I could go to Mars as well. It would seem like such a far off, difficult concept. And I was so focused on other things.
Yeah. And Mars might be even easier to get to, maybe you thought.
It might be. And then later I was led to call a synagogue to learn Hebrew. And I called them and they said, I'm sorry, we don't really teach people outside our synagogue. And then just before she hung up, she said, wait, I thought of the perfect person for you. And so she gave me the number of a tutor, a Hebrew tutor. And so my first ancient language was Hebrew. And then I was in seminary. I was so inspired that I learned Greek as well. And so after I had learned Hebrew and Greek, and actually that summer I took Latin also, it was a very interesting situation because here I had learned Hebrew and Greek, and I was grateful for these languages, but I still didn't feel that they were deep enough. And when I was at seminary, I had a friend that said, here's an interview with the Lord's Prayer in Aramaic. And you're a native Aramaic speaker, right?
Yes, yeah.
Well, you take it for granted, but here I had lived almost 30 years on the planet, and I didn't even know that Aramaic was still a spoken language. And I went to my Greek professor, and he is very well known. He has his credentials are from the Ivy League schools. And I said, did you know that Aramaic is still a spoken language? And he said, no, I didn't even know that. And so I called the person who was on giving the Lord's Prayer in Aramaic, Dr. Rocco Errico, who's just, it turns out, a very sweet man. And I said, Dr. Errico, I've just learned Hebrew, I've just learned Greek. I'm at a point of life where I can go anywhere. Where can I learn Aramaic? And he said, there's only one place in the world you can go to learn Aramaic right now, and that's San Diego, California. And I thought, well, if anyone knows, he would know. So I said, what do I do? And he said, well, you call Father Michael Bazzi and ask him if you can join his class. And so I did that. I called Father Michael, and the rest, as they say, is history. I mean, it just went from there. But it took me moving all over the country. I was up at Berkeley, California, and I moved down to San Diego specifically just to learn the Aramaic language because it was one of the last places that I could learn Aramaic.
Now, were you already in the publishing industry before that? Because I know that Father Bazi is one of the authors that you publish. So how did that formulate?
Well, that's a great question. I was a teacher and a coach, and I was coaching tennis and teaching English as a second language. And when I finished seminary, I was taking languages there. I didn't complete seminary. I was praying, and prayer is one of the bases for all that I do. I love to pray. It's one of my favorite things. And the idea came because I'd finally found a woman coach. I'd coached for 20 years, and at the school, I was coaching a girls' team, and we had 3 coaches, and 2 of them were female. And I called the athletic director, and I said, it looks like we have enough coaches this year without me, and maybe since we have a female coach to coach the women's team, you don't need me. And he said, you're right, we don't need you. So I just gave away my job to one of my former students, who I was very happy that I knew she would be capable enough, and she ended up doing a great job. But then I had no work. And so I turned to my Father, Mother, God, and I said, okay, what should I do now? And the idea came, write a book. Write a book about your whole experience teaching and coaching. And I know that there are many artists out there, and sports and art don't always go hand in hand. But truthfully, when sport is played well, it is an art. The word compete in Latin means to bring out the best in another person. And so here I was coaching teams, and we were playing all these other schools, and it was just like, in a way, art. It was this very beautiful thing. And so I decided that the idea came to me to write a book about my experiences. And so I wrote the book, and I wrote it from my heart, and I realized that there were not going to be people mentioning that would want to publish this book because it was about sports and it mentioned God. And major publishers, that's like a buzzword. You can't really do that. Hopefully in our situation, you can, but I
had that figured out by then, yes. Okay, that was very smart that you had figured that out.
I knew no one would publish it, but I knew I couldn't write the book without mentioning that I have to give some credit to my success, to the reason that I was there. And so then I wrote this book and I published it, and it was just a simple little book. And if you can see it, it's called High School Coach's Handbook. And I have a number of books that I'm going to share. And just so you're aware, I'm what's called a digital nomad. Have you ever heard of that term?
No.
I hadn't until yesterday. And I read an article, and there's a whole group of people now that are nomads. They go from place to place, and they work on their computers, and they're digital. And in this time of pandemic and wildness that we're all dealing with, these are people that got out of the big city. And so for myself, I'm what they call, I read this article, I sent it to my parents, and I said, what do you think? And my dad said, actually, I think you are a digital nomad, right? So the book that I'm sharing are some of my best friends, because I have to carry them with me. I don't have a car. So I travel across the country, and I do this, everything I have to carry. So I was reading another article in the books, and it said that the books are our closest companions. So you'd better companion with good books. And so in my story, when I got into publishing, the book of Psalms says, the Lord gave the word, great is the company that publisheth it. And so this was kind of my inspiration, was that I would publish and be affiliated with things of a spiritual nature. And so the education and spirituality is key to my publishing company. And after I was in Father Michael's class, I moved down there, and he met me, and I was in the class with 21 Chaldeans and myself. You were
the only non-Chaldean?
I was the only non-Chaldean in the class, and I took the class.
Good job.
It took such
that
courage.
takes a lot of courage.
But I realized I was in the room with people that had more courage. They had come all the way across the world for their freedom. I had only moved across my country for their freedom. So, so I was so grateful for this. And Father Michael introduced me to several books. One was his children's book, Read and Write Aramaic. And so I ended up publishing that. And the book was...
the name of your publishing house is Let in the Light Publishing.
It's Let in the Light Publishing. I was down surfing one time and I was under a double rainbow. And these were big waves, and it was Central California, and it was dawn. And I just, when I saw these rainbows, the idea came, let in the light. So I just wrote that down when I got home. And then later on, that became the name of the publishing company. And I didn't know it when I was out surfing that morning, that it was going to become that. It was just such a tremendous moment to be in a storm, out surfing with big waves under a double rainbow, that I ended up calling it Let in the Light. And so we published this book. This is the book that we use in college. This is actually classical Aramaic. And Father Michael teaches classical and modern Aramaic. As a matter of fact, there are not many classical Aramaic teachers in the world. Rocco Errico, Dr. Errico, and have you met Dr. Errico yet?
I haven't, but he is going to be interviewed by us, I believe, in either January or in February. So, so everybody's going to be introduced to him very soon.
He's a kick. He is a kick. He's one of the most sincere, enthusiastic men I've ever met. And he and Father Michael were collaborators on this early classical Aramaic. And Rocco, you know, for those that want to learn Aramaic, he now has a new School of Light. And I attended his opening in October, and it just is so wonderful that he's working to preserve and keep the language alive. And so, yeah, the company ended up, it's still being formed. As a matter of fact, if anybody out there has a book that deals with education and spirituality and they need it published, we're happy to publish it. That's what we do for a living. And Father Michael's new book, I should mention, are there many people from Tilkepe originally in Detroit?
Oh, yeah. My parents both were from Tilkepe.
Oh, my gosh. Well, Father Michael's new book is The Life of Tilketnaye. And we have a special right now that when people order it through the end of the year, they will also get the book to learn the language as well. Because
and this book was just literally published just this month, I believe, right? Is this his newest book?
It is. As a matter of fact, we're advertising a trilingual, one in Arabic, Aramaic, and English. And that book officially has not yet been published. The book I showed here, this one is a prototype. So this one is the early version of it.
I love the title.
Yeah. Well, he has these photos that are so meaningful to him that he took originally. There's over 30 photos in the book that Father Michael took while he was in Tilkepe. And so it was just learning from Father Michael, learning about the Chaldeans, learning Aramaic. You can't separate the language of the Chaldeans, Aramaic, from the Chaldean people. That's been my experience, is that they're so closely intertwined, and that the Chaldean people, because of the important role that they've played in history, their language is, in order to really understand them, it's most helpful to learn their language.
And, you know, can you mention the website? Is it just leninthelightpublishing.com if people want to visit and find some of those books that you just mentioned?
Yes, yes. And that's where this book is as well, on preserving the Chaldean Aramaic. It's www.letinthelightpublishing.com. And my email, if you want to get in touch with me, is www.letinthelightpublishing@gmail.com.
Okay.
And we're happy to share. In our company, we also do tutoring for Aramaic. And so you have Dr. Errico, who's part of the company, an author within the company, teaching Aramaic. And then, of course, Father Bazi is teaching Aramaic, I think on Facebook on Thursday nights, he said. So,
okay.
Yeah, all three of us are really working to keep the language alive. That's kind of our West Coast contribution to the Detroit Chaldean community and keeping the language alive. And of course, Father Michael served in Detroit. He opened a couple of parishes there. So he has that strong connection to Michigan.
And you've been very helpful with us. I mean, since we met, you knew that we're working on a project to help preserve the Chaldean Aramaic language, especially the Chaldean. Well, Aramaic is not just Chaldean for Chaldeans, but there's a dialect that Chaldeans have. And we have been, you've been very helpful in the project that we're trying to work on right now. So we really can feel your passion for that. I think like when you came here, this is why you got such a welcoming reception because you're very sincere and your efforts are very obvious, you know, on what you're trying to do. Now, I think it was right after you finished your master's this year from Claremont Lincoln University, a Masters of Interfaith Action. So this is a very unique degree, and I believe that you were graduating while you were here, like it was online. Was it here, or did you have, I mean, this is where the digital nomad perk, I guess, comes in. I think everybody's gonna have to become that basically very soon. But it's an interesting and unique degree, and did you graduate just this year, right?
Yeah, it was such a unique story. Have you ever heard of the Society for Biblical Literature?
Yes, I have. I'm not very familiar, but I've just heard about them.
It's the oldest society for biblical study in the United States. And they have an annual conference that rotates every year. And like 10,000 scholars from all over the world attend this event. It's really a big deal. I read an interview lately that called it the major leagues of Bible study. And
where do they meet once a year, or where did they used to meet?
Well, in 2014, they met in San Diego. And they have one of my favorite things to do at the SBL conferences is go to the publisher's room. They have this giant conference room filled with books. And as you can tell, I'm a bibliophile. I love words. And at this publishing house in 2014, in the room, Claremont Lincoln University had a booth. And they had just started a brand new school. And it was called, instead of being the Claremont School of Theology, it was the Claremont Lincoln University. And I met Mr. Lincoln while I was there, who he's since passed. But they recruited me to join their school. And I had looked for masters in theology or masters of religion, and none of them were quite the right fit for me. But a Masters of Interfaith was, to me, this was this great thing. And so I ended up signing up for the program, and it took me close to 6 years to finish an 18-month program.
Wow.
And interestingly, by the 6th year, because of lack of interest within the topic, that master's degree no longer exists. And they were the only place that had a Masters of Interfaith Action. So yes, you're right. It is a unique degree. And now they have a minor. They have a Master's in Peace and Social Justice with a minor in Interfaith Action. But it's such an important aspect of theology is to deal with people who are comfortable in their faith and want to contribute to the world in a way that will uplift humanity through faith. And so that's what this degree was. We had Jewish rabbis and Hindus and Muslims, all different kinds of people in the coursework. And so it was this really rich and wonderful coursework. And as it turned out, it was a digital online community at Claremont Lincoln University, and it still is, that when the graduation was postponed in March, they moved it to the last weekend in August, and that was the weekend that I was in Claremont, in Detroit. And so here was this wonderful adventure in Detroit. And I should mention, I mean, I ended up sending out an email to many of my friends, and it said Detroit as Disneyland, because I was having so much fun. And I met the nicest people there. If it's all right, can I share with some of the people that I met?
Oh, sure, of course. Because I know it's like all it takes is for one person to connect you with one Chaldean, and then next thing you know, you're like, you think you're on this little, we have our own world here. And it's funny because, yeah, very few people know about us or that we still speak Aramaic, even, you know, sometimes maybe neighbors, but once you come into our homes, everybody just, you know, loves to embrace just people that we're introduced to.
Yeah, well, I was writing this thesis, and it was interesting because Aramaic fits into the interfaith community. I'm not sure that you're aware, but the root of Hebrew and Arabic is Aramaic. Did you know that?
I learned that from reading your book.
Yeah. Well, I know that you also know some of these languages. And so for me to as a linguist, a lay linguist, to really get in and study these languages, I had to do research, and there was very little written on the Aramaic language. And the first book that I found that I was so grateful for was by Amr Hanafatui. And this story is so rich and so great. And again, these are like my closest companions, because I can either put socks and shirts in my backpack, or I can put books in my backpack. And right now I'm carrying these books instead of an extra pair of clothes. And so that's how much these books mean to me. But Amr's book on the untold story of native Iraqis is excellent. And then I had the most wonderful experience with Jacob Bacall. And he had written Chaldeans in Detroit.
Yes.
And he has a nice chapter on language in here, and I included it in my work on preserving the Chaldean Aramaic language. And when I went there, he gave me a book on Chaldean Iraqi Association of Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was so grateful to not only read the books, but also live and experience it, to visit Shenandoah, the country club there, to see the museum, to see all the effort and all the love for the community that the Chaldeans have. It gave me this book as well, 100 Questions on Chaldeans, which I think you wrote the foreword for.
Yes, I did. Yes.
Excellent foreword. Well done.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, after living in San Diego for 7 years, and I should mention that 20 years beforehand, I lived in San Diego for 7 years as well when I was a student at UC San Diego. And in my 7 years as a student at UC San Diego, I didn't learn one thing about the Chaldeans. I didn't know they existed. I didn't know Aramaic existed. I just lived in the community. And so this book here, 100 Questions, it's so relevant. So thank you for your contribution to that. And the understanding of the Chaldean community, I had this image from the media that people from Iraq wore turbans, that the women wore the burqa, that they were not people that would integrate well into America. And in my experience in learning about the Chaldeans the last 7 years, it's been just the reverse. They're some of the warmest, humblest, most beautiful people I've met. And then the other book, and this one I've really been enjoying. Yes, I thought that would bring a smile to your face.
I think you're the only Chaldean, I was going to call you a Chaldean guy. I think you're the only guy that has read, from our community that has read this book. So thank you. Because now you're in our community now, okay? So just to let you know, I don't know if I ever announced that to you, but you're like officially from the Chaldean community. And I think you're the only a man that has read this book. So thank you. Although it's very informative in general, it's a nonfiction.
And I love that aspect of it. I've studied the Bible for so long, and there are not many texts that I trust that talk about the Bible outside of the Bible, the non-canonical area, that you can really learn and grow from. And this book here, Mesopotamian Goddesses by you, was one of the books, like I had heard of Lilith, but I didn't really know that Lilith existed. And I had heard that Yahweh, well, actually, I had never heard that Yahweh had a wife. I mean, this to me was so groundbreaking. And I had studied Queen Semiramis. Mm-hmm. I learned that she was also, not only the first queen with recorded power, but there was controversy as to which community, the Armenians, the Greeks, or the Chaldeans, was going to claim her. And Amr in his book says that she was a Chaldean princess married to an Assyrian king. So I've just so much enjoyed my journey. I so much want to share what I have learned with the world. I feel that the entire faith community could benefit from learning Aramaic, from studying the Chaldean community. And I'm just so grateful for the work that you're doing at, I mean, how is the museum doing during this wild time? I mean, you don't have visitors or anything like that. Is everything okay there in Detroit?
So we have visitors can come by reserve, they have to reserve to come and visit. But what we have tried to do is kind of similar to what you're saying, like things are going on digitally. So right now we have the opportunity to interview you because of that, because prior to that, we were really restricted to like the building, and doing events at the building. But we have seized the opportunity to get people acquainted about our cultural center, our heritage, through these online discussions. And in the process, what I really love about this and what people have enjoyed is that we're also learning about others. So it's not just about, it goes both ways. We're just as interested to learn about others as we would like people to learn about us. But like something, and sometimes it's hard to communicate something that important just through writing or just kind of making these announcements, but by storytelling, like how you got involved, how you discovered, oh, there's actual Aramaic speaking people that live here. Well, people in Michigan and very educated, same experiences, they'll meet us and they'll get surprised at what language we speak, what is our history. And this is why, like people that are listening to this, because you're so passionate and you've dedicated so much of your time through writing this book and also supporting authors who also are trying to preserve the language and by providing classes. What can people do to help those who are interested to preserve the Aramaic language before it becomes dead? And by the way, I've had a few guests already that also are involved with that. We had a guest from Israel who's preserving the Assyrian Aramaic language, and we will have more guests, like hopefully like once a month or so. But what is your take on that? What can people do to get involved and to help the process?
Well, you bring up an interesting point, and that is the language of Aramaic, because it was so global, does not belong to just one ethnic group or one culture.
Yes, correct.
My original thesis was just called Preserving Aramaic, and they said that's not specific enough. But one of the things that I learned from Rocco, Dr. Errico, was that the dialect that Jesus spoke, and there are over 150 different dialects, is probably closest to the Chaldean Aramaic. Okay. And so for those that have a heritage in this language, the number one thing I would say is to realize you have what I would consider the most significant language in the history of mankind as your heritage. And for those that speak Aramaic, of course, to be aware and to speak with discretion, but to share that they are Aramaic speakers with humanity. I had an email this morning. I sent out that I was going to be on this, and a woman in San Diego who's an American member of my church, she was at a grocery store yesterday, and the woman behind her had a young child, and she started speaking with the woman, and it turns out that the woman and the child were Chaldean. And as soon as my friend greeted her, Shlama, in Aramaic, this woman and my friend had the best conversation. And had my friend not reached out to this woman, she would have never known the rich heritage of the woman in line behind her. And because the woman in line behind her and her child were willing to share what they knew about their language and their heritage, it made my friend's day. Here we are in this kind of, nobody's out shopping these days, and it's wild, and people are afraid of each other for the weirdest reasons, and some good reasons as well. But to break the ice through understanding and through sharing about their heritage, I think all your listeners who are of Chaldean heritage and Aramaic speaking in general, just to share with the general public their understanding and to not be fearful. We're in a free country. They can do this. That would really help to spread the word.
And also not to take it for granted. I think that is what you said earlier, like when we started, you said something that we probably take for granted, that this is like, I get surprised when people don't know that we exist. You know, I read an article saying that the Chaldeans and the Aramaic speaking people are dead. And I'm like, no, we're not. Not all of us, you know, yes, we've experienced a lot and genocide and oppression, but there's a community that has survived. There's a Chaldean community that survived. There's an Assyrian community that has survived, and we're around. And this is when I realized, though, it is our responsibility at the end of the day to help bring awareness to it. Because how are people, you know, people are not going to go looking for that, not thinking that it's dead, right? So either they're going to stumble on it by chance, or we have to put effort into getting the word out. So, and we really appreciate all the work that you're doing. I mean, this book, I've had the chance to read it. It is so informative. It is what I really like about your book. It's very easy to read. It really just gets to the point and to the heart of this, the subject matter here, you know, about the modern decline of the Aramaic language, the use of Aramaic in the United States, history of the Aramaic speakers. It's very basic, but it's very informative at the same time, because you get to the heart of each subject, so that person doesn't feel like overwhelmed by the information and get turned off. Quite the opposite. I felt like when I was, and then it has some very nice pictures as well. But for me, I felt like when I was done with this, I felt like I wanted to read and to know more. So what is your plan in the future, Roy?
Well, it's
the next Chaldean Aramaic book going to be about?
Well, I've been looking at doctoral programs. How can I best support Aramaic? How can I best support the Chaldean people? And really just turning to God to say, you guide me. It's up to you to preserve this language. I'm happy to be your emissary, to be your agent, to be your transparency, but it needs to be your work, not mine.
Wow, that's beautiful. And it's obvious that God has been very generous to you, because every time you lost your job or been thrown out here and there, you've come and created something very, very creative and beautiful. Thank you, Roy, so much for all of your hard work. And we look forward to be interviewing some of the authors that you publish, as well as having you back on the show, because I believe that you're going to continue doing this great work, and you'll have new information to share with us. But thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Ami. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.